right, Malpal, let's do some math. We're going inside the numbers. Last week, if you remember, we took a look at the highest scoring offenses in any classification. We didn't specify how many games were played either. It was just the highest total points. This time we're doing something a little bit different. So we're going to take a look at the end of the year. Our DCTF computer puts together ratings. Now these are different than our rankings. These ratings are a numeric value with a formula that our good friend Jerry Forrest has come up with. And this is the most inclusive ratings formula that he has. Basically what it takes a look at, and it takes a handful of things into account here. One, your points for versus your points against. So that's basically a percentage-wise. Obviously, that's how you can tell who has the best defense, is taking a look at those points that you scored versus the points that you allowed. It also takes into account how many games you play, how far you make it. Obviously, state champions are going to play in more games than someone who didn't make the playoffs, so it does take that into account. But it also takes into account your strength of schedule, because you would think about it and go, okay, well, if the state champions probably scored the most amount of points, they probably had a pretty good defense, they definitely played the most games, well, it's just going to be the state champions, isn't it? No, that's where it comes in to change. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of the state champions are in this list, but where it differentiates is the strength of schedule along the way, because not everyone who plays in a state championship game, whether you win or lose, really played the toughest schedule. So it kind of takes all of that together. Jerry does the really hard math. I did the easier math, and we're taking a look at the rankings for the top three, the ratings for the top three teams in each classification. Let's go ahead and get started, Malpal. We will start with the big dogs. Let's go with 6A. So again, Texas high school football inside the numbers, the top three DCTF computer-rated teams in each classification. And 6A, well, it was the 6A Division II state champs in Austin Westlake with a rating of 213.38. To put it into perspective, if you want to go points for versus points against, Westlake scored 908 points, but they only gave up 142 points. Mm-hmm. So while their strength of schedule may not be as difficult as some of these other teams listed, their points for versus points against were so dramatic there that it gives them the extra boost. So that kind of gives you a look as to how this is going. Then you go down, and it's the state champions from the 6A Division I ranked in the North Shore Mustangs with a rating of 206.11. Following that, in third place is the runner-up for 6A Division I in Duncanville, 205.63. And so you think back to who Westlake played. It was Denton Geyer. They were pretty close up there in the rankings, but ultimately, based on the other teams and all of those things that we said go into these ratings, they felt like Duncanville had a little bit, more on their points for, points against. They had a little bit more on their strength of schedule, and so that's kind of just a look at how these work. So there is your 6A DCTF computer-rated teams, the top three of them.
And looking at that Austin Westlake resume, too, looking at how big they won per game and how little they held their opponents to, how little points and yards that they had, it makes sense that they're up there. And I think the closest game they had played all year was that Denton Geyer game.
Oh, absolutely, because even if you want to look at strength of schedule for the regular season, you would think, okay, Lake Travis, they're a really good team. They blew Lake Travis out of the water. So when you look at a team like Lake Travis, who is definitely in the upper echelon of this list, obviously not in the top three, but still up there, then you compare it to that, and it's like, oh, man, Westlake's going to get that big bump on it.
Yeah.
So there is 6A. Moving down to 5A Division I. Here we go. It is Katy Pato, the 5A Division I state champs, and these obviously a lot closer than what we saw in 6A. 192.59. Following them was the state runner-up in College Station with a computer rating of 190.89. And then in third place, it was the Denton Ryan Raiders, 179.63. And if you think back to what Denton Ryan has to play when you have First Go Lone Star, when you have all of that in that kind of Region 2 conglomerate, it wasn't surprising that they would take up that third spot after the first two teams that played in the state championship.
Yeah.
Moving on now to 5A Division 2 out of our top 3 DCTF computer-rated teams. We're going to start off with the champion, the South Oak Cliff Golden Bears, 188.43 coming in at their DCTF computer-rated team. And then after that, here's where I said that there's a little bit of a switch up based on your level of competition. Aledo obviously got knocked out by South Oak Cliff, 187.8, so they're not far off from each other. Well, that's because Aledo scored 712 points on the year and only gave up 173 points, and that's without playing, 2-3 extra games? So that's why their rating is higher. They had a much tougher test to get there than maybe a Liberty Hill out of Region 4 would have had, and their rating obviously deducts from that being at 179.10. So there's a little bit of that switch up I was talking about between it. It's not just state teams that played in the state championship. Right. Strength of schedule does play a huge factor in this. Moving on, 4A Division 1 rather. And this was super interesting because I want to go back for a second when we talked about last week in our highest scoring offenses. You had number 1, Austin LBJ, number 2, El Campo, and number 3, Stephenville. Well, when you take a look at everything, and especially that strength of schedule that Stephenville had to go to in that Region 2 of beating Argyle, beating Melissa, beating Paris, they obviously had a very difficult strength of schedule, so that put them in number 1 with a rating of 178.18. After that, well, it's their bunkmates in Melissa, 174.53, and like we said, they weren't even a top scoring offense in this classification. One of them, not up in the top 3, and so they fall into the second-ranked team there, and then it was the state runner-up, Austin LBJ, with 172.86 points for their DCTF computer-rated scale. We are talking Texas high school football inside the numbers here as we take a look at 4A Division 2 at our top 3 DCTF computer-rated teams. It's the state champions in China Spring. They have 179.20. Then we go down to the runner-up in Gilmer, 174.84. And then it's Salina, 174.76. And you can see just how close Salina and Gilmer are right there in a big stretch of that. Salina obviously playing less games, but 602 points for, only gave up 160 points. So that was an incredibly high-flying offense that had a really, really impressive defense and quite a tough schedule there. So it wasn't super surprising to see Salina up there, but I thought that was very interesting. One of our closest ratings in between two teams in Gilmer and Salina there.
It reminds me a lot of 4A Division 1, just what these teams had to go through in order to make it, up to this chart.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, none of these teams had light schedules.
No.
Moving on now, 3A Division 1 we go, and how about that? It is the state champions in the Lorena Leopards. We talked to Coach Ray Biles yesterday. If you missed that, it's on our YouTube page. 173.01 coming in at their ratings here. Brock follows it up with 168.65, and then Mount Vernon. This is much like the Salina team, where it was a high-flying team that made it pretty deep into the playoffs. They had a pretty stinking difficult schedule to get there, 161.08 points under first-year head coach, so impressive there by the Mount Vernon Tigers. Moving on to 3A Division 2 we go. This one, well, again, Franklin, Gunter, and Waskom. So this is actually one of the few of the top 3 DCTF computer-rated teams as the top 3 highest scoring teams. Franklin came in with a rating of 176.9, Gunter 167.28, Waskom 166.79. And again, Franklin was just the dominant team in Texas high school football in 3A Division 2. They were our wall-to-wall number 1, and you can tell from that rating system, I mean, that's almost 10 points higher than second place. And you see how close Gunter and Waskom are. So that really shows the substantial amount that Franklin is that much higher than the other two teams.
Yeah. And the state championship proved that.
Yeah, a ring never hurts, I guess
Yeah.
they say. So congratulations to Franklin on that. Moving on to 2A Division 1, and this is a little bit of a switch from last week when we talked about the highest scoring offense. Last week, it was Refugio was the highest scoring offense with 822 points. Shiner came with 764, and we talked about how surprising that was considering that Shiner played 1, more games, and 2, beat the tar out of Refugio when they played them. Well, this is kind of where that ends up equaling out, because you look at their strength of schedule after that. Shiner went on to play Timpson, which means that when you play number 3, you're going to get boosted with strength of schedule to get to that highest, and I believe Hawley was 4th in this, which would mean obviously the state runner-up. So Shiner really kind of secured the win here in their last 2 games of the season, which were the state semifinal against Timpson, and then Hawley obviously in the state championship, to keep those rankings, or those ratings where they're at by our DCTF computer. All right, moving down to the smallest 11-man classification in 2A Division 2. This one, Stratford, 152.98. Then those Mart Panthers, 149.18. Congratulations to Coach Hoffman on his retirement, by the way. We will talk about that more in headlines next week. And then finally, it was Falls City in 148.86. And this was another one where Mart, they were our top highest scoring offense, 779 points in 2A Division 2. So that really, really kind of played a factor in this. And they played Falls City, which is tough. And then, but Stratford, 152.98, the Elks leading in 2A Division 2 in our DCTF computer rated teams. Now to 6-man football we go in 1A Division 1. It was Westbrook with 108.93, and just 0.03 points behind them was the state champions, not the state champions, rather the state runner-up in the May Tigers, 108.9. That is so stinking close. And May was our top point team in 1A Division 1 with over 1,000 points. And Westbrook didn't even touch that, but with their incredible defense that obviously we saw in the state championship game, it gave them that 0.3 points. And you win the state title, you probably get bumped up by 0.3 points. So this one was, just neck and neck in the race. And then finally coming down, Water Valley, 107.41. And if you take a look at their schedule, it's no shock that they're into that third. Now moving on to our final, smallest classification here. It is 1A Division 2 in the 6-man ranks. The Strawn Greyhounds. Nope, not surprising at all on this one. 110.28, and they were the largest scoring offense, 1,083, compared to only giving up 383 points. Talk about domination in every single phase of the game, and they proved that in the state championship game. Motley County following just behind them, 102.13, and then finally Coach Vance Jones and his Balmorhea Bears creep into the 3rd place spot in 1A Division 2 with a DCTF computer rating of 88.78. So there you go. It is Texas high school football inside the numbers, top 3 DCTF computer rated teams. And like we said, I thought this was interesting because rather than just looking at the highest total offense or the best defense, this really is our most comprehensive form of ratings when you take a look at points for versus points against, how far you made it, how many games you played, your strength of schedule, everything like that really kind of gives you a good rating into which teams were the best all around.
Right, and if there's any ever argument, now you can look at this and be like, okay, yeah, you can see, because I know we had a lot of controversy with, Franklin and Gunter, them going back to back all year between that 1st and 2nd place spot. But this right here kind of is the nail in the coffin saying, yeah, Franklin is the best.
Right, and it's perfect because I feel like the Shiner Refugio one was the one that stuck out perfectly to me because you look at it and you go, okay, to be honest, neither of those teams are ever super tested until they play each other.
Right.
And then Shiner went and closed it out. So that's exactly why, even though Refugio had a ton more points on the year, even with 2 less games, well, Shiner was battle tested, and they made it through the rest of those games.
Right.
So there you go. Inside the numbers, taking a look at our top 3 computer-rated teams in each classification.
Hey, thanks for watching this clip here on YouTube. If you like this kind of stuff and you want more of it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, you can watch us live every weekday at noon at TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, or here on YouTube. And if you want more of the best coverage of football in the state of Texas, check out TexasFootball.com and become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com/subscribe.